Alice and I are always looking to be more healthy, and we were just talking about how fasting is one of the best ways to do that, but it's so hard. But the great thing about Prolon is that's not what you're doing. It's not that you're not eating for 5 days. Instead, you're using their science-backed program to convince your body you're fasting.
You guys, this 5-day program really is amazing. It comes beautifully packaged and it does all the thinking for you. Each day is its own box. And by following their program, I know I just feel so much better. And I can't wait to experience Prolong Next Gen and continue to see results. For a limited time, you can be first in line to experience the new Next Gen at special savings. Prolong is offering the Prosecutors listeners 15% off site-wide plus a $40 bonus gift when you subscribe to their 5-day program. Just visit prolonlife.com/prosecutors. That's PROLONLIFE.com/prosecutors to claim your 15% discount and your bonus gift. prolonlife.com/prosecutors.
In a world where we have every reason to give up, I'm here to show you that there is beauty in life on the other side of trauma. I'm Jessalyn Biederstadt, host of Invisible Scars, a podcast where we dig deep into stories of resilience and transformative breakthroughs. Each week, I sit down with incredible guests, trauma specialists, alternative healers, and real people who have faced unimaginable challenges and come out stronger. We'll explore how they found healing and hope and how you can too. So listen to and follow Invisible Scars, available wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the Prosecutors. Today on The Prosecutors, an all-too-familiar tale, Amber Tuccaro, a young First Nations woman, disappears after hitchhiking in Edmonton. Following a haphazard investigation by the RCMP, her case remains unsolved. But what makes it different is the phone call. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of The Prosecutors. I'm Brett, and I'm joined, as always, by my Giziwadaji co-host, Alice.
All right, Brett. You know what? I don't know what that means, but it was amazing because you attempted it after, that was like a quinsyllabic word, and you have been driving all day with your kids, so I can't believe you did that. You win an award. Go home, everybody. Go to sleep.
It means kind and generous in Ojibwe, which you are kind and generous, Alice. So it's the perfect descriptor for you. Yes, it has been a long weekend leading up to this.
Can I just say real quick, Ojibwe is like one of the most beautiful languages I've ever seen. Maybe I'm only hearing Brett's pronunciation of it, but all the words you've used have been like absolutely stunning.
I just make it up as I go along.
Well, for those who actually speak it, I'm sorry, but it's a beautiful language.
It is a beautiful language. It's a beautiful language. So, Alice, I'm coming to you fresh off a trip to Disney World. It was incredible.
Congratulations for making it back.
Really enjoyed it.
And when a parent says they go to Disney World, they go for their kids. So, congratulations on being like parent of the year.
There's these whole set of Disney commercials now. And it's like people talking about Disney and how much they enjoyed going to Disney. And there's one that's a dad talking about taking his daughter to Disney, and I get all like choked up every time I hear it. Oh my God, exactly, that's right. So we had a great time. Took both kids. They loved it. They met all their favorite princesses and just were over the moon. So we had a great time.
Who are the favorite characters for each of the kids to meet? Was it Elsa?
So little guy loves Cinderella.
Oh, he does?
He does. Loves Cinderella.
Really
so
sweet.
Excited to meet Cinderella. And then my daughter and Frozen, both Elsa and Anna, they were both very excited about that. But his favorite is Cinderella, and her favorite is Ariel.
Oh.
She met Ariel. He met Cinderella. They both met. I mean, they both met all of them, but they both met Elsa and Anna. Here's some of their favorites. But we also met Moana and Jasmine and the Beast.
Do they question, like, do they think it's really them? You know, like, I tell my... Okay, I didn't know, because, like, you know, like, when we see all the Santas, I say, well, Santa has lots of helpers so that they can be at all the malls. And so they are like, oh, like, he's a representative of Santa.
When we met Snow White, my daughter was telling her how she needed to stop taking things from people she doesn't know, and she didn't need to eat any more apples from any more old ladies. I mean, she was giving her all this advice, and I'm like, that's good advice.
That's
good
really
advice.
Sweet.
And Snow White was like, you're right. You know, I shouldn't do that anymore. I've learned my lesson. So it's pretty awesome.
That's awesome.
Pretty awesome.
That is awesome. Well, welcome back. Sounds magical.
Good to be back. And look, we have a not magical case for you today. It is one of those, you know, the more you do this, and we've said this in other episodes, but you see how these cases all have very similar beats to them. And these cases that we've done primarily in Canada, though a few in the United States, though honestly it doesn't really matter where you do them, but they have a very similar tale for many of these First Nations women who are in dangerous situations already, but you see a similar story and then you see a similar response by the police, one that unfortunately allows a lot of these cases, most of these cases, to go unsolved. And with this case, with Amber Tuccaro, we're seeing another case where we have someone who, you know, is hitchhiking, they go missing, the police are not going to respond as swiftly and as thoroughly as you might hope. And then what do you see? You see a case that grows cold. But there's something about this case, a chilling thing about this case that separates it from others, but also may make it solvable. And that is a phone call that is made in the middle of this story. And it's one that we're going to play for you. And hopefully when you hear it, someone out there is going to recognize something that gives us some hope for solving this case.
Absolutely. And listen to this case, guys. I know we've covered a few of these where there's just so little information. Not so here. This is honestly very similar to the Delphi case, where the victim herself takes matters into her own hands and records probably her last moments. That is a time capsule for us on the investigative side to try and find, which makes this all the more aggravating, to be very honest, in terms of the investigation. Because when I first started researching this case, I was like, oh, I know who did it. I was so wrong. I was so wrong, because you'll see why we say that. So put all of your thoughts about what these types of cases are like aside, listen to everything, because we probably have the killer's voice. Someone may recognize his voice. So if you don't listen to us talk, listen to the clip of his voice and see if we can't bring some justice to Amber and her family.
So Amber Tuccaro was born January 3rd, 1990 in northern Alberta, Canada. And as a baby, she was adopted by Andrew and Vivian Tootsie Tuccaro into a home with 4 brothers. Amber and her family, who were members of the Mikisew Cree First Nation, lived in Fort McMurray. Amber was adored by her family, and her brother Paul described her as the baby of the family who loved music and could draw chuckles from a whole room with her knee-slapping laugh. And that's from a National Post article that we will link to and that you can check out if you want to read more about this story. She maintained a close relationship with her family members, particularly her mother, Tootsie.
In 2010, Amber was 20 years old. She was a young and devoted mother to her 14-month-old son, Jacob. Jacob was her whole world, and Amber was working really hard to create a good life for him and for herself. She was devoted to him. She worked hard. She was really the model of what you would want in a young mother. But you see, this was difficult, as it is for many women, because at the time of the story, Amber was trying to afford a home for her and Jacob, and it's expensive. It's incredibly expensive. I think a lot of people are in a similar situation now. And so while she was trying to save up to be able to provide for her son and to find a stable home, she was staying with family and then also a local women's shelter called the Unity House. Already you're seeing kind of the classic signs of a vulnerable woman. Very young, right? And has a young son who is totally dependent on her. And she is single, meaning she is everything to this child in terms of financial support, emotional support. It's a lot on one person. And even more dangerously, she's in situations where people can see that she's transient. When we have transiency, a lot of times law enforcement chalk it up to if they're transient at some point, they're going to be transient all the time. So no one's ever really missing. That's unfortunately a bias that law enforcement have.
And because she doesn't have, I mean, once again, like I said, the beats, right? The song is different, but the beats are so often the same. She doesn't have a permanent residence at this time. She doesn't have a place she's supposed to be, which makes it easy for her to not be missed, for people not to realize that she should be somewhere where she isn't. Now, this case is going to take a little bit of a turn, but as Alice said, the police are still going to look at it this way. They're still going to look at it as a, look, just because she's not where you think she should be, there's all sorts of places she might be. So how do we know she's missing? I mean, that's going to happen, and it's one of those things that makes it so much harder to solve a case.
So while she's at this women's shelter, Unity House, she meets a woman named Evangeline, and the pair become fast friends. I can imagine it must be a lonely life, being 20 years old, having a 14-month-old son, having to be the sole breadwinner. And she finds a friend, kind of share these burdens with, be able to live life with. And they hit it off really quickly. And in August of 2010, even though they were new friends, they decided to take a spontaneous trip to Edmonton. Now, Amber's mother, Tootsie, had some hesitations about Amber going on this trip so last minute with someone she didn't know that well. But Amber reassured her that everything would be fine. Amber works hard all the time. She just wanted a girl's weekend away with a friend. And I can certainly understand that. You know, a quick trip, it's more affordable when you get to go with a friend and you get to just blow off some steam and kind of forget the day in and day out drudgery of work and childcare. But she does bring her son with her. So Evangeline, Amber, and Jacob get on a flight to Edmonton on August 17th, 2010. They'd made reservations at a hotel outside of the city of Nisku, Alberta. And they arrived to Edmonton without incident. It was a pretty easy trip up there, and they're excited to just get away for the weekend. Sadly, Amber would never return home from this trip. 14 years later, this case is still unsolved, and Amber's killer has never been brought to justice. Jacob is a teenager now, probably does not remember his mother, and does not know what happened to his mother.
And I know what you're thinking, and it's the same thing I was thinking, and it was the same thing Alice was thinking. If you don't know this story and all the facts you've heard so far are the ones we've given you, you're thinking Evangeline is involved in this. I mean, that is the first thing that comes to mind. It's like, well, it's obvious who did this. It's the, should have listened to mom. It's the friend she barely knew. Spoiler alert, that is not going to be the case. There's some chilling facts about this case that pretty clearly demonstrate that Evangeline is not involved, and that in fact there was nothing really nefarious about this trip. It really was just two friends who became friends very quickly, who were going to just take a weekend to themselves to go off, have a little fun, and come back. Something that anyone should be able to do without having to worry about violence descending upon them. But unfortunately, that's not what we're going to see here. So let's look at the timeline. August 17th, 2010. So Amber, her son Jacob, and her new friend Evangeline, they hop on this flight to Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, to enjoy, as Alice said, a girls' weekend. In order to avoid paying the high city prices, the girls decide to stay at a motel outside of the city, the Nisku Place Motel in Nisku, Alberta. Now, I admit, I have been to Canada, never been to this part of Canada, completely unfamiliar with it. I don't really know anything about it. Some of you who are from Canada, who are from Alberta, who've spent some time in Edmonton, you may have some idea of where exactly this is, how far away it is from the city. This is, to me, it is literally a foreign country. And it is foreign to me. But they have decided they're going to save some money. You know how it is. It doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter what country you're in. It's always more expensive to stay in the heart of the city than it is to stay on the outskirts. And they don't have a lot of money. So it makes sense that they're going to do this. So the next day, August 18th, they decide they're going to go into Edmonton. They're going to do some shopping before heading back to the hotel for the evening. So they do this. They come back, and the plan is, they're going to relax. They're going to stay at the hotel, enjoy some downtime. But at around 7:30, Amber decides she wants to go back into Edmonton. And so she asked Evangeline if she could watch Jacob for a little while. Evangeline says, fine, that's great. But she's not entirely sure why Amber wanted to go back into the city. Amber wasn't clear with her whether it was something she wanted to pick up. Who knows? It could be any number of things. She wasn't entirely sure why she wanted to go back into the city, but she wants to go. Evangeline obviously doesn't want to go, but she's willing to stay with Jacob. So how is Amber going to get back to the city? Now, they are staying in this motel outside of the city to save money. So what is she not going to do? She's not going to do things like call a cab or do something that's going to cost a lot of money. I remember when I was young and stupid, I've never hitchhiked. As you guys know, I've picked up a hitchhiker, but I've never hitchhiked. But I do remember I lived in D.C. for the summer, and I was going to Georgetown. I was taking classes at Georgetown, and it was the 4th of July. So 4th of July is a big deal in D.C. There's big fireworks in the middle of the city. Well, the thing was, during the weekday, there was a bus that for like a quarter took you from Georgetown across the river to the metro station. But it didn't run on holidays and on the weekends. So a friend and I and my now wife, we buy a cooler, which we bought the cheap one that didn't have wheels. And we put a bunch of ice in it and put a bunch of drinks in it. And then we're going to walk all the way from Georgetown across the Key Bridge into Virginia to the metro station. And we're obviously, even though there's 3 of us and we could have split it and it wouldn't have been that expensive, we're not going to pay the money for a cab because this is not what you do when you don't have a lot of money. That is not an expense you're going to do. So we walked that thing all the way, and it was torture. It was hot. It was July 4th. It was a long way. We're walking across this bridge, like sand and gravel is like flying up and hitting us as all these cars are driving past. It was terrible. I will never forget it. But we did that just to save a couple dollars. Amber's in a much worse place than we were as far as money goes. Money's already tight. This trip is in of itself an extravagance. So she's going to try and save money any way she can. So how is she going to get back to Edmonton? She is going to hitchhike. She walks out onto the main road and she hitchhikes looking for a ride into the city. Sometime after 7:30, between 7:30 and 8, according to Evangeline, she gets into what has been described as possibly a red pickup truck with an unknown man.
Again, I have not been to Nisku or Edmonton, but if you look at the map, it's really only about 35 minutes away from Edmonton. Like, there's clearly, just like most city, there's like circles, and the further you get out from the circle highways, the farther you are from downtown. Edmonton's clearly the center of like the business district. Nisku is like just a bit outside of the big circle in terms of shopping and whatnot. So we're not talking about like some farmland hours away. They're within about basically 35 minute driving from there, but much too far to walk. There's not going to be buses that go back and forth. Certainly not 7:30 at night. So this is August. There's still going to be some daylight. It's not going to be pitch black, but you're approaching on dusk and darkness. It's a little bit after dinner time. So anyone going into Edmonton, especially on a weekend, you're not going in for work, right? Like, this is not rush hour going into Edmonton. You are probably going to catch just a few cars going into Edmonton, meaning you're just going to get into whatever car comes forward to you. Again, unfortunately, this is sounding a lot like other First Nation with missing women stories that we've talked about in the past. She's described, she would be categorized as a transient person because she doesn't have a permanent home or address. She does things like hitchhike. Because in this area, Canada is vast. It is a lot of wilderness. It's a lot of forests. You're not going to be able to walk places. Certainly not if you stay outside of a city. Hitchhiking is the way a lot of people travel, not just Amber. We've already heard this happen so many times before. And whatever she wanted to go back for, I don't know. It doesn't seem like she was meeting anyone. Otherwise, she wouldn't be hitchhiking. I would think that if she was meeting with someone, there'd be a certain time. Maybe that person could have picked her up. And what we know is she's a devoted mother. She loves Jacob, right? I know some of this may jive a little weird if you're like, well, but she's leaving Jacob with Evangeline. But you probably have met a friend before where you really hit it off. They clearly really hit it off. That's why they're sharing a motel room and going on a girls' trip together. So she trusts Evangeline enough to leave Jacob with her. But who knows, maybe she just wanted to go back into town and get a gift for her mother. maybe something for Jacob. And 7:30 is pretty late for a 14-month-old. My kids are usually in bed by 7:30. So I can imagine, like, Jacob's tired all day. Brett's been at Disney World all day with his kids. He knows, like, it's kind of hard getting things done when you have a 14-month-old. Certainly, if it's been a long day in a new place, probably better to leave him at home, let him get to sleep. She can get back into town, come back by like 9:30, 10, not that late. But he's well on his way to Dreamland.
And, I mean, look, they went all the way to Edmonton, and one of the things they were going to do was some shopping. You can imagine if she forgot to get something, it's not like she's going to be out that way again anytime soon, right? So I could see her thinking, oh, man, I should have got that one thing, and then going back.
Should have gotten that purse. Like, just loved it. Or my mom would have loved that purse. Like, I saw it in that store, especially, by the way, like, if you're shopping and you don't have, like, a ton of money, I think about what I want to buy for a long time. Like, when I was in college, law school, I didn't have a lot of disposable income. I would walk in and out of a store of something I wanted to buy 10 times before I bought it, because I was like, do I really want it? And then if you get all the way home, you're like, I really wanted that. I really, really wanted that. And that may be as simple as what it is. Now, you guys are maybe thinking you're just speculating. Well, there's more. So August 19th, 2010, and we are speculating, but there's a point to the speculating. Evangeline starts getting really concerned because Amber has not returned, and it's the next morning. So she calls Amber's mom, Tootsie, and Tootsie hadn't heard from Amber either. Remember, Amber is very close to her mother, Tootsie, so much so that Evangeline knows how to contact her mother, right? And Tootsie said, I haven't heard from her since yesterday, which is unusual because we talk all the time. So immediately Tootsie calls the RCMP, but the officer told her that Amber's probably just off partying and she'd be back soon. Again, the police are thinking 20-year-old leaves baby at home in a, fun city. She's just out partying. She's bar hopping. Don't worry. And that Tootsie had to wait 24 hours to file a missing persons report. 24 hours is everything. Every minute, every hour matters. And obviously, we have two people who know her pretty well at this point, right? Evangeline, who is in that motel with her, has her son, who is described as like Amber's everything. She wouldn't just leave him. And Tootsie, who hears from her every day, doesn't hear from her. There is enough cause to be worried 12 hours later, but yet they can't file a missing persons report yet.
I would go out on a limb and say this is not actually a policy. This is one of those things that 30 years ago might have been a policy. This is 2010. And I was going to tell you, if you ever call the police and you get this response from an officer, oh, you got to wait 24 hours, hang up the phone and call the switchboard again. You'll probably get a different officer, and hopefully that officer will be better at their job. Because what this officer should have done is think a little bit about the specific circumstances of this case. As Alice said, we're speculating a little bit, but it is just as likely that she was simply going back into town to do a little bit more shopping. That was the purpose of being in Edmonton. And if the officer had listened to what he was being told, he would know it is unlikely that she's going out to party because she doesn't know anyone there. She didn't say she was going to a party. She doesn't have any friends in Edmonton. That doesn't even make sense in this specific situation. I mean, sure, if she was just in her hometown, yeah, maybe she went to a party, she passed out on the couch, she's sleeping it off, she'll be home a little bit later. But there's no reason to think that. And we know that she has hitchhiked with someone she didn't know, which is obviously something that is a risk factor. So this should have been something that tripped in this officer's mind, And you got to think about, in the context of the other cases we've talked about, we've talked about the Highway of Tears. That is not this, and that is not this case, but nevertheless, it was something that was at the forefront of the RCMP's mind at the time. They're putting together all these task forces. There's all this discussion about it. And what was one of the key things that they looked at? Hitchhiking, because that is something that is dangerous and that can lead to some unfortunate situations. And you have that danger here. You have that aspect that should have made the officer think twice about this. But instead of doing that, he just gives the old party line. And Alice and I have the opportunity to talk to officers a lot. And one of the things we always say is, yeah, we all get in the headspace where 99% of the time, this isn't going to be anything. 99% of the time, a missing persons report is going to resolve itself. And that's fine. And that's something to remember. And it's something to think about. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't listen to the particular facts of the case, because this might be the 1%, which is what this was. But because you have this from this officer, you have this sort of, they don't care and they're pushing mom off, and it's only going to get worse.
This message comes from Greenlight. Ready to start talking to your kids about financial literacy? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app that teaches kids and teens how to earn, save, spend wisely, and invest with your guardrails in place. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Join millions of parents and kids building healthy financial habits together on Greenlight. Get started risk-free at greenlight.com/Wondery.
Well, fast forward to August 28th, 2010. Now, despite Amber's mother, despite Tootsie saying Amber would never abandon her son. I mean, now we're well past 24 hours at this point. And especially with someone she hardly knew, the RCMP is not taking her disappearance seriously. In fact, only 10 days after Amber was last seen, the RCMP actually closed the case and removed Amber from the missing persons database based on a report of a potential sighting. Now, we have heard this before. This is another thing that we saw happen in another case. You guys may recall the Jack family. And there was a report that the family was fine. Just a random phone call, the family's fine. And the RCMP closed the case. And the family had to fight to get it reopened. Same thing's happening here. There is a sort of random report that she's been seen. And so rather than even attempt to verify that call, the RCMP takes the position of, oh, well, she's been saying she's fine. Obviously, she's not a missing person. Close the case. 10 days after she went missing. That is the situation where we have with the RCMP. They're no longer actively looking for Amber.
I don't know how you can do that when you literally don't have anything that she's there. Like, can you imagine if that's all it took to close? Just think about what a terrible policy this would be. If I were going to be a serial killer or a kidnapper, I would just call in as soon as there was a missing persons report and be like, as an anonymous tip, and be like, I think I saw this woman that meets this exact description at a bar. Case closed. No one will ever be looking for all of my victims. I mean, this is just like outrageous. We've always talked about how faulty these firsthand direct evidence sightings are, especially by strangers.
And look, I hate to be tough on the RCMP because we don't deal with them. I've never worked with them. I don't know anything about them as an agency. They may be amazing. You know, I don't want to do what so many people do and just criticize from a position of ignorance. I don't want to do that. I want to give them every benefit of the doubt. But I got to tell you, this seems to happen so much in these cases. It's just again and again and again and again, you have the RCMP responding with basically a shoulder shrug. And I get it. They probably don't have as many resources as they would like. They're probably spread thin. All of the traditional arguments you get from the police when they don't investigate a case enough. And those are real things. You know, they may be excuses, but at least they're true. Nevertheless, you keep seeing this, and it's like they never learn. They don't learn from their mistakes. Just take it a little bit more seriously. Simple things like follow up on this. Because I tell you who isn't seeing her. I tell you who isn't reporting a sighting. Her mom. Her mom's not saying, oh, you're right, she's back. Thank you so much for your help. Evangeline's not saying, oh, yeah, you know, finally she came back. You know, I was worried about her. None of the people who know her are saying this. You just have this one anonymous tip, and that's enough with RCMP to wash their hands of this. And it's not like they quickly correct this error. In fact, it takes an entire month. It's not until the end of September with Tootsie just continuously putting pressure on them and saying, you have to do something, that the RCMP finally reopens the case and adds Amber back to the missing persons database. But by this point, it's late September. She has been missing since August 18th. That is a lot of time lost. It's a lot of opportunities to find her and solve this case gone.
So sadly and unfortunately, based on what you've heard so far, the case is completely cold. There's nothing that really happens for about 2 years. And 2 years later, August 28th, 2012, the RCMP released an audio recording of a phone call between Amber and her brother. Let that sink in for a second. They didn't discover this call 2 years later. They likely had this call basically as soon as Amber disappeared. We don't know why. It took 2 years to release it, but I guess this is an attempt to revive a cold case. Now, you may be wondering, how do they have this recording? This is amazing. What's on it? What does this tell us? Because we've been telling you, we hear the potential killer's voice, right? Well, here it is. So this audio is just a conversation between Amber and an unknown male who she appears to be in a car with. It's not a conversation with her brother. You see, Amber's brother was incarcerated, and so all of his phone calls were recorded. Anytime you call the prison, also like in the United States, it automatically starts recording. And it's possible that Amber knew this. And so she knew she was on a recorded line, which is why she called her brother and wasn't having a conversation with her brother, but rather was using that recording device so that someone could capture what was happening without the person she was in the car with knowing what was happening. You could imagine like a pretend butt dial, for example, and then just letting it run. That's kind of exactly what happened. If that's what she was thinking, oh my goodness. I mean, Amber should be incredibly applauded for thinking about doing this. And this is why it's important. We all know that if you record something on your phone, first of all, someone finds it, it's obvious what you're doing. You're recording them, right? Like if they see the red button, they're like, you're recording me. They could fly into a rage. They could immediately get violent right then and there. If they are going to do the most terrible thing to you and kill you, you're not going to be able to do anything with your phone when you're dead. They'll probably find your phone, destroy it, evidence is destroyed. But if she's able to get this call recorded somewhere else, like on a prison line, then that, even if her phone is never recovered, it doesn't matter. That recording still exists. Can we just take a moment? And I mean, I don't know that that's why Amber called her brother, but there's a pretty good bet that's what she was thinking. This is incredible, cool-headed level thinking at a time of crisis for her. Just like why we've been praising Libby German in the Delphi case for taking out her phone and also recording who we think to be the killer bridge guy. And we obviously know that at the end of the day, they did not make it, but they were able to think quickly at that time. That's what Amber has done here. I mean, I cannot emphasize enough, if this case is ever solved, it's because of Amber's quick thinking. Now, what we get on this recorded line is a conversation who law enforcement assumes is her murderer. This call was not a blip. It wasn't a butt dial because it lasted for 17 minutes total. But all the police released in 2012 were 61 seconds, so about a minute of it. That's all that's out there. And we do have a clip of it.
So we're going to play this now, and then we'll go back and read you the transcript of what was said. And for those of you who are bothered by profanity, there is some profanity in this, which is not surprising.
I'm sorry. If I'm about to be murdered, I will also be very profane.
Yes, absolutely.
Where are we by?
We're just heading south of Beaumont, or north of Beaumont.
We're heading north of Beaumont. Yo, where are we going? No, this is a... Are you fucking kidding me? You better not be taking me anywhere I don't want to go. I want to go into the city. Jeez. Yo, we're not going into the city, are we?
We're going.
No, we're not.
Yes.
Then where the fuck are these roads going to?
50th Street.
50th Street. Are you sure?
Absolutely.
Yo, where are we going?
50th Street.
50th Street.
50th Street.
East, right?
East.
Over town.
Travel.
South.
You guys, there is no substitute for listening to that, because listen to Amber's voice. This is why I think she did this on purpose. She is calm, cool, collected, and she's doing the things that you would want the person who is trying to preserve this to do. She repeats what he says. She's asking leading questions. She's being very forceful about saying, where are we going? Where are we going? You said 50th Street? Are you sure 50th Street? 50th Street? East? East? She's saying it over and over because recognizing that her voice is closer to the microphone than his voice is. So just in case his voice isn't being picked up, she's doing all the things that you would want anyone who's trying to do rescue missions to do. And I can't believe how calm she is sounding, but clearly something has gone wrong and she recognizes it immediately. That's the other thing. Her spidey senses go up, and the fact that she's recording for 17 minutes, this is going to come in very important in just a little bit. You'll see why. Shows you that she has good instincts and she immediately takes action.
Yeah. So just to run through the transcript in case you couldn't make it out, it starts off with Amber saying, "Where are we by?" And the unknown male says, "We're just heading south of Beaumont or north of Beaumont," which that's a good sign that, you know, he's just making this up. Like are you south of Beaumont or you're north of Beaumont? Those are a pretty significant difference between the two. And Amber says, "We're heading north of Beaumont." So I think Alice is right. She doesn't know what's going to happen at the end of this phone call. I think she's obviously figured out that this person means her harm, but she doesn't know if he's kidnapping her and taking her somewhere, if he's going to harm her. She doesn't know. But by calling this number and leaving it recording, she's leaving breadcrumbs for the police too. I mean, she is essentially telling them exactly where they are, and based on what he's saying, where they're going. And keeps going, "Yo, where are we going? Just, no, this is the back roads. Are you effing kidding me? No, I'm not kidding you. You better not be taking me anywhere I don't want to go. I want to go into the city, okay? One end of the street. Yo, we're not going into the city, are we?" And look, she's trying to also, I think, convince this guy that whatever he thinks he's getting into is not going to be as easy as maybe what he thought. Because obviously, one thing most criminals want is an easy score. Whatever it is they're going to be doing, they don't want somebody who's going to fight back, somebody who could get away, could alert the police, anything like that. So by being so aggressive, I think she's also hoping that this guy will be like, "Look, just get out of the truck," right? And I think in a lot of cases, that might actually have worked. I think there probably were a lot of people who would have done that, who just been like, "Just never mind, just leave." But she continues to push back. And he continues to try and convince her, no, we're going exactly where we need to go. Yo, we're not going to the city, are we? We are. We're going. No, we're not. Yes. Then where the F are these roads going to? To 50th Street. Are they actually on to 50th Street? I don't know. Is there a 50th Street in this area? I don't know. 50th Street? Are you sure? Absolutely. Yo, where are we going? 50th Street. 50th Street. 50th Street. East, right? So this is another where she's trying to nail down where they are. You know, they were north of Beaumont. If there is a 50th Street, they're heading east on that street. So she's giving more sort of idea to the extent she can of where they're going. Then the way this is written, it's written as inaudible over now. That's the official transcription. I think it's pretty clear. She's probably saying pull over now. She's done. She's ready to get out. And at that point, there's something gravel, which maybe him saying, "I can't pull over," is gravel or something like that. And then it's inaudible at that point.
And another thing to note, remember, Amber's not from here. I don't know how many times she's been to Edmonton, but if she's staying out in Nisku, my guess is she probably doesn't know enough about Beaumont, North, South, East, 50th Street. That's why I think she's doing all of this on purpose, because she's saying things confidently as if she knows where she is, which is good. By the way, you know, we give you guys tips on how to get away with crime all the time. Here's a tip on how to hopefully, on the margins, avoid being a victim, is to do exactly what she's doing. Be difficult. Obviously, it didn't work out for her. If you have someone who just is going to do you harm no matter what, you know, it probably doesn't matter what you're going to do. But this is also what I think Libby and Abby did in Delphi, is to be difficult, right? Be difficult, be assertive. Her voice isn't shaking. She's repeating things authoritatively, whether they're true or not, right? East, west, 50th Street. Hey, yo, where are we going? Pull over now. Pull over. She's being assertive. She's not being a shrinking violet. Sometimes if you're on that margin, that's enough for the person to be like, forget it. I don't want to deal with this. I'm just thinking about this because my kids were doing this tonight. There are a bunch of hamsters in like a hamster terrarium. I'm not exactly sure what it was, but they really wanted to hold one. And I was like, this is not going to go well for my kids or the hamster, right? And they kept trying to catch a hamster. Guess which one they picked up? The one that cowered in the corner that they could reach. Guess which ones they didn't? The one that scratched the bejesus out of their hands, right? Be the victim who scratches the bejesus out of the perpetrator. May not always work, but it could. It could on the margins. And this is why this is so devastating because, man, I don't know Amber and I wish I knew her, but she's clearly smart. She is confident. She takes things into her own hands and she's not going down without a fight. And you can hear all of this in the 61 seconds. I don't know what's on the other 16 minutes, but it's probably a treasure trove of information, even if there are no words on it, because I think it tells us about what's going on. Now, according to Amber's brother, the RCMP had this audio for a year before they released it. Again, I think because this is being recorded and the way, at least in the United States, prison phone calls are recorded over, unless like there's a reason to keep it, recordings just take up space, right? So the fact that it exists 2 years later or 1 year later, if they're saying the RCMP had it for a year, indicates they probably knew at the time that there was this call. And so if you have a missing persons call come into the police and it's only been 12 hours, not 24 hours, but you know you have a recording, someone needs to go listen to it and you could probably figure out within minutes that something really terrible has happened and you better file that missing persons report. This is why in this case, I'm like, there were a lot of missteps here because there were so many indications that a missing report should have been filed and should have never been removed from the missing persons, as an active file anytime soon, especially with this call on record.
And it really does make you wonder about what exactly is going on. The fact that they had this call, when they had it, it's hard to say. But I think Alice is right. This phone call would have been discovered fairly early on because it otherwise probably would have been deleted or recorded over. You just don't keep this data that long. And think about this. This was also back in 2010, 2011. I mean, now having like a terabyte storage is not uncommon. Having stuff on the cloud is not uncommon. At the time, they still would have been using probably hard storage, probably not a lot of it. They probably would be recording over it fairly often. I don't know what her brother was in for, but maybe it was something where you listen to jail calls. I mean, people, you guys will never understand, unless you do our jobs, you will never be able to understand how often people discuss their crimes over the phone. This is one of those things where, like, sometimes people will say, I don't trust jailhouse informants because who would tell somebody what they did? And it's like they say it on a recorded phone line all the time. It blows your mind. So it might have been that they were like, oh, wow, her brother got a 17-minute phone call. Well, I wonder if there's something juicy in there. And they listen to it and they're like, oh, shoot. But it seems like when they listen to it, everything should have flown into high gear, right? I mean, at that point, they should have been like, oh, my goodness, this is a kidnapping. Let's go full bore. Let's get this out to the press. But they didn't do that. And so while on the one hand, I'm skeptical when family members say things like these because family members are angry for good reason. Oftentimes they don't understand the protocol and they may not be accurate. This is one where it seems like he's probably right. They probably knew about that phone call for a very long time, and for reasons that are not clear, they did not release it. But the situation is only going to get worse. On September 1st, only 4 days after the audio was released, Amber's partial skeletal remains were found in a field on a rural property in Leduc County by horseback riders. The place where her body was found was a little more than a 17-minute drive from the hotel, which you may recall is the length of time of the call with her brother. So probably what happened here is some relatively short period into this drive, she realized something was wrong and she made that phone call, and it ran at least until the time of her death.
And because of the time of the call matching basically how long they were driving, I think it's probably fair to say that if there's additional conversation in that call, it probably got escalated and is probably emotionally distressing for some point. And I understand maybe not wanting to release, like really panicked conversation. She's probably screaming, crying. At some point, there might be more on the call. But when you can get someone's voice in different variations, in different states, it helps people identify them. His voice is actually pretty clear in that call. I don't know where she positioned the phone, but like I can hear him. It's a pretty clear indication. If I knew that voice, you could be like, wait a second, that's Gary. He lives down the street, right? And so, but if you hear different variations, maybe him yelling or him speaking in different ways, it just opens up the spectrum of people being able to identify him. And so I do think there's a really good chance that there is additional conversation because it hasn't really escalated yet in the part that we hear. It's relatively friendly in the sense that he's still part of the lie, right? He's like, oh, everything's fine, everything's fine. Pretty soon it's not going to be because she's telling him to pull over and he is now resisting her and things are going to get heated and there's probably more. So I do hope that if someone knows something, they can have access to what the other parts of his voice and his emotions sound like, maybe his mannerisms. Some people act a certain way when they get agitated, right? When maybe they have sayings that they do or the way they react or tics or whatever that can really trigger someone who may know the person.
So, despite having relatively clear audio, the police do not make much headway in the case. On March 20th, 2014, Amber's mother, who we called Tootsie several times, that's what she goes by, her name is Vivian. She files a complaint with the chair of the Commission for Public Complaints against the Leduc RCMP. The complaint says the investigators downplayed Amber's disappearance and took her off the missing persons list despite no one seeing her, which is accurate. That's from the cbc.ca. And the family took issue with several different things that the investigation did. Paul Tuccaro testified at the National Inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. Specifically, they were upset about the lackadaisical nature of the investigation. And just to give you a few examples, including some of the ones we've already discussed. Police downplayed the family's concern when they initially tried to file a missing persons report, claiming that they had to wait 24 hours and saying that she was probably off partying. Her name was wrongfully removed from the missing persons database, a mistake which was not corrected for a month. The family was frequently passed from officer to officer, and the RCMP did not stay in touch even when Amber's remains were found. I mean, even at that point, I'm not going to say they're not taking the case seriously because they may, but they're certainly not trying to do anything for this family, one that they've wronged pretty seriously up to this point. And this one just kills me, Amber's personal belongings remained in the motel room for months before police eventually collected them. And then they threw them out rather than returning them to Amber's family.
I mean, again, I don't necessarily think it's calculated ill will, but this is why it's so important for people to remember that like victims and victims' families are at the if you lose sight of that, you really lose sight of your job. I mean, little things like you don't think her son and her mother would like her last belongings that she had in Edmonton? Like, I mean, your mother's last shirt. You know, like if I had to grow up without knowledge of who my mother was, like that would be incredibly precious to me. And to know that it was kind of tossed out like a piece of trash is just so emotionally damaging. And obviously that may or may not even have evidentiary value. Like from an investigative perspective, I want to keep everything from that moment because you know what? No one's cleared until they're cleared. Maybe there were fibers on her. Maybe she had met someone. Maybe anything. When you have so little information, you want to keep everything. And the last things she touched, I would think at least you'd want to like document them at the, just do everything you can to try and show you care, but also investigatively be smart about the evidence that you do have. So on August 27th, 2018, I mean, years are just hopping by with nothing happening at this point. The Civilian Review and Complaints Commission of the RCMP released a 120-page report regarding the investigation into Amber's disappearance. Thank goodness, by the way. The review characterized this investigation as, quote, deficient and inadequate, and stated that, quote, the officers involved in the case either weren't trained properly or did not adhere to training policies and guidelines that should be followed in a missing persons case. That's from the CBC. And this could be twofold. They could have really done an internal investigation and they're trying to make sure this doesn't happen again. But yeah, of course this didn't follow policy, because if it did, you're going to get a lot of lawsuits. So unfortunately, they have to say that, right? They have to say that it's not their policy or that these people weren't trained. I really hope that this report, which is a very long report, 120 pages, was a wake-up call that this is not the way you conduct investigations. This is not the way you run investigations. This is not the way you treat people. People will continue to disappear at alarming rates, especially vulnerable populations, if anyone views investigations in this light. And this report goes on to issue several recommendations, including that the RCMP make a public apology to Amber's family, which is the least they should do. But again, I hope those recommendations don't fall on deaf ears, because lives can be saved. And you know what? Deterrence is a real thing as well. If I know I can call in a fake sighting and get people off my back and cases closed, and I know no one's going to look into a case for 14 years, I'm going to go keep murdering like vulnerable women. Why not? But if you start knowing that the RCMP or law enforcement takes this seriously, the risk factor for your little game of serial killing starts to become a little too high, and maybe you'll just take up fencing instead.
So I don't know how many of the recommendations were followed, but the RCMP did issue an apology, though it took them a year to do it. So in July of 2019, the commanding officer of the RCMP in the Alberta district apologized, saying, "Our Leduc detachment's initial missing persons investigation was not our best work." That is the understatement of the year. That was certainly not your best work. I don't know who wrote that one, but I might have rephrased that sentence. That was Deputy Commissioner Curtis Zablocki. "The early days of our investigation required a better sense of urgency and care." Yes, they did. Amber's family rejected this apology because they did not find it to be heartfelt. And it doesn't sound that heartfelt to me. Not our best work is, that's... Not our best work is when you worked really hard, but you made a couple mistakes. I mean, this is like your worst possible work.
This was not
hopefully,
work.
Hopefully you wouldn't look at this and be like, well, it's not our best. I mean, hopefully you would look at this and be like, wow, usually we do way better than this. This is one of the worst cases I've ever seen. Not our best. So I'm not surprised that they rejected the apology, because it's not much of an apology, and it was too little, too late.
So this brings us to January 2020. It seemed as if there might be a break in the case when a man called the RCMP to report that he believed his father was responsible for Amber's murder. He also posted this on Facebook and implicated his father in several other murders in the area. The RCMP did look into this lead, but unfortunately, this tipster's credibility was called into question when it was discovered that he called the Banff RCMP the month prior to implicate his father in several murders there, all of which had already been solved. Really quick here, hopefully they did other investigation as to why there was credibility, but he may not have known those others' murders were solved, and if he stumbled upon something, I don't know what, that led him to believe that he clearly thinks his father is responsible for not just one, but multiple murders. So like a serial killer type. And I don't know if that's enough to say you're wrong on these, because obviously we have copycat killers. We have people who span lots of different places. The fact that he's calling multiple places, yes, he might be a hoaxer. That's definitely possible. Or it could be that serial killers sometimes go lots of different places to avoid detection as well. So I don't know, but I think it's really interesting, especially that he goes to Facebook, by the way. I think it kind of shows you the confidence that people have in law enforcement.
And I will say this, it is both shocking and a really sad statement about things, about how often people are convinced that one of their parents or a close family member, a brother, a son, committed a crime. I mean, you see this all the time. You will often see people call the police and say, hey, I just saw this case. I feel like my dad could do that. We have had people reach out to us about unsolved cases and say, hey, I think my dad might have done this. And I've talked to them. We've directed them to the appropriate authorities. So far, I don't know that any of those tips have borne out, but it is not something that's that unusual. So while it would be nice to think maybe this is the lead that's going to solve the case, I think probably at the end of the day, it won't be. Which brings us to theories of this case. I think the one thing we can say here that is pretty obvious, it is highly likely that Amber was killed by whomever picked her up hitchhiking that evening. I guess it's possible that when she yelled at them, they let her out of the truck and then somebody else came along and killed her. I think that is highly unlikely. So if we figure out who this person is, if we figure out whose voice that is, we can find this killer. Now, one thing people always speculate about when you see a situation like this is a serial killer. Yes, it seems unlikely that you're just going to happen to get into the car with a serial killer. But as we pointed out multiple times, that's exactly what has happened to many women who've gotten into the car with the wrong person, whether it's Ted Bundy or someone like this, or someone on the highway of tears. And the thing about hitchhiking, I almost feel like if we had a more pro-hitchhiking society, it would be safer. Because I feel like at this point, if someone picks you up, saying this is someone who's picked up a hitchhiker before, but that probably says something about them.
Confessions
Unlikely
of
they're going to be
a
me.
hitchhike serial killer right here.
Yeah, maybe they'll be me, but I think more likely, and they'll take you exactly where you said, and hopefully you're not the killer. You know, it's the old joke. You know, somebody picks up a hitchhiker, and the driver says, you know, I can't believe you just get into my car. I mean, I could be a serial killer. And the passenger says, what are the chances there'd be two serial killers in the same car? Right? So you never know who the killer is going to be, right? But you probably, if you get into a car, if you're hitchhiking these days, there's going to be at least some questions about who's picking you up. And in fact, it seems like there may be a serial killer operating in this area. 5 different women's remains have been found in less than a 5-mile radius in Leduc County, leading people to speculate that there may be a serial killer. I'm going to go through them. Edna Bernard, she was last seen September 22nd, 2002. Her remains were found the next day. Katie Sylvia Ballantyne was last seen April 28th, 2003. Her remains were found July 7th, 2003. Dolores Brower was last seen May 15th, 2004. Her remains were found April 19th, 2015. Corey Ottenbright was last seen May 9th, 2004. Her remains were also found on April 19th, 2015. Now, there is a bit of a space here because 2004 is the last woman in this series until you get to Amber, who disappeared on August 18th, 2010. And once again, her remains were found September 1st, 2012. Now, look, like I said, there's some space there, but if you think there's a couple things that could be going on. Number one, this may not be the only area this person operates. And number two, it's not that unusual to have gaps. If you followed the Long Island serial killer, you know there's some gaps there that have led people to wonder about whether or not some of the murders that we know happened are connected to the same person or not. Now, the RCMP has not openly confirmed that these women and that their murders were linked in any way, but they have said on multiple occasions that a serial killer could be operating in the area, and they've warned people about that. In 2007, they said they were investigating the possibility that one or more serial killers were targeting the Edmonton area, and in particular, sex workers in the area. In 2015, they stated that they believed Corey Ottenbright was killed by a serial predator. So there's a very good chance there is a serial killer in the area. It wouldn't be surprising given sort of the size of the place and the fact that you have all these women who are murdered mysteriously and their remains are found. Whether or not Amber is part of that is hard to say. Obviously, she is not a sex worker, but she was someone who was hitchhiking. So I don't know that that really matters. I don't know if that really distinguishes her in any way. And I could imagine a serial killer who's out looking for someone. This is an easy opportunity. And that's one reason sex workers are targeted, is because it is an easy opportunity to get someone alone in a secluded place, and then you can commit a murder. You could see the same thing happening here with the hitchhiking.
So, a couple more things that we probably know about this person is I don't think Amber knew who this person was. That's why I don't think Evangeline had anything to do with this. I don't think this was some sort of setup because I don't think she knew who this person was. If she did, I think she would have said that person's name multiple times in this call because the call seemed to be a message from Amber. It wasn't a mistake that she had this call recorded. And she's speaking to him as if he's a stranger as well. She doesn't know who he is. She doesn't use his name. He doesn't say her name. So I think this is a complete stranger whose voice is clearly heard here. Second, I think he knows this area, which is why he's driving here. He knows enough to say north of Beaumont. He knows enough to say 5th Street East. We're going into town. So Edmonton's not that big. Nisku's not that big. Sure, when you start going out to like the broader perimeters of the suburbs, it gets a little bit larger. But I think if you know anyone in like Edmonton and the greater areas, there is a very, very high likelihood that somebody knows this person. I don't think this person is just like a lone trucker driving through because of the way he's talking about the streets. He at least knows the streets enough, or he's studied the streets enough that he can spit out words that make it seem like he knows where he's going, or let the person he's driving feel like he knows what he's doing. Because this is what Amber's doing. She's not letting on she doesn't know where she is. She's not letting on that she doesn't really know this area. She's throwing out specifics and making him confirm or deny them. And so if you're going to go through the effort of like looking at a map, even if you're not from there, and you want to do harm to a young woman, you'll have studied the map, and then probably this is your hunting ground. You'll probably come back, right? Or you live in the area enough that you didn't have to study it. So I say this because if we're trying to think about who this could be, I think it's someone who is living and might still be living in this general area. So talking about kind of who this may be, there is a name that has come up. Because after the audio footage was released, at least 2 different women came forward on separate occasions saying that the voice sounded like that of a person named Pat Carlson. Now, Carlson was well known in the Alberta area, and he had served time for sexual offenses. Basically, he would lure women, young women, to his ranch by placing ads offering them free room and board in exchange for work on his ranch. And once there, he would sexually assault them. And he was such a threat to women in the community that the RCMP issued a warning about him when he was released from prison. The same RCMP who didn't take this seriously. So I think that says something about how dangerous he is. Now, the RCMP confirmed that they did speak to Pat Carlson regarding Amber's disappearance, but they could not identify anything linking him to Amber. So it could be that because Pat Carlson is a known danger in this community, that and his voice is similar enough to this person's voice, that 2 independent occasions and 2 independent women were like, that sounds like that really scary predator in our community. It could just be that, or it could be Pat Carlson, and they just have nothing to link him to Amber because she doesn't fall into the mold of what he's been captured for. She wasn't going to the ranch to look for work in exchange for free room and board. All we really know is Pat Carlson is a predator of young women in this area, and he's known. If you're going to be a sexual predator in an area, you're probably going to be on the top of the list of people linking you to them. So I don't know if this has any teeth. I think we need to know more. And obviously they talked to him and it didn't go anywhere in terms of arrest.
I mean, I don't know what they expected to find. I mean, if he did it, he didn't know her. It was a random attack. He murdered her. He had plenty of time to get rid of any evidence. So I don't know, they go and interview him unless he says, oh yeah, I picked her up. I dropped her off. I promise. I didn't do anything to her. I mean, there are people who would say that. I mean, there are criminals who are that dumb, who say things like that. I mean, the Delphi trial, I guess by the time this is released, will be over. And I guess we'll be dealing with that. But in that case, you have someone who went to the police and basically said, oh yeah, that bridge guy you're looking for? That's me. I didn't do anything, but that is me. I was the guy on the bridge. And basically just said that. And you're like, why would you do that? Well, that's the kind of thing criminals do. So sometimes you go and interview them and you hope that they'll say something like that. Now, he didn't say that. So they're like, well, we don't have anything to link him except his voice. I have no idea whether it's him or not. Unless, and this is a possibility, they do have something like DNA or fingerprints or fibers or something that they found with her body, and they were able to talk to him, maybe take his DNA and compare it. That could be what they mean, and they just don't want to say that because they don't want to give it away. But it just doesn't seem like they have a whole lot other than this phone call. Now, the phone call's a lot, but it may be all they have.
So I know we've kind of drawn some parallels with the Delphi case, which is obviously very active in the courts right now, been on a lot of true crime media outlets. That's why we're drawing that comparison. But the fact that the Delphi case has gotten so much attention for very similar facts makes me so confused why Amber's case doesn't get the same type of attention, because it should. She also knew something was wrong and took matters into her own hands. At the end of the day, it didn't help her in terms of saving her life. But if this case is solved, it's not going to be because of the RCMP. It's going to be because of her quick thinking and the 17-minute call that they have. So yes, this case has the potential to be solved. They have the audio. We have the man's voice. You all just heard it. They have partial remains from Amber. I don't know what's on it. I don't know if there's DNA. I don't know if there's indications of how she ultimately died that could be something that leads them to the killer. Something like, for example, if you see knife marks on her skeletons, for example, that might be able to link you somehow to a particular type of hunting knife. Something like that. We don't know that, but because they have partial remains, there could be a lot of information they could glean from it. There's also probably additional evidence that we don't know about. And there could be a link between Amber's case and others in the area which remain unsolved. And if those cases get solved, maybe we'll find out more, whether from jailhouse confessions or trying to get reduced sentences so we get confessions, something like that. But there's absolutely the potential for this case to be solved. And I think the first step is to get that call recording to as many ears as possible, especially people who live in Alberta, because I do think he is familiar with this area. Even if he doesn't live there, I think he passes through often, has family there, something like that. And someone probably knows this person, and they may be the link that can really crack this case and finally bring Amber's killer to justice.
Yeah, and this case should be better covered. I'm not sure why it's not. I mean, we have audio of the killer. And this is a striking case. It struck me as soon as I learned about it. I will say one podcast that has covered it, Tim and Lance Missing, we talk about them a lot. I mean, they cover a lot of these cases, and a lot of cases that aren't as well known as others. They did a couple episodes on this. I hope you guys will check them out as well on it. But I think the most important thing, all of you go listen to the audio again. We will post it on our website. Rewind and listen to it, especially if you're in Edmonton and anywhere around there. I don't want to limit it to you because this person may be mobile. They may not be from that area. You know, we're recording this live. We got some people in the chat room. It's really interesting. This, once again, goes to how different people can see different things, what the accent is. I think he sounds like he's Canadian, but we got people who think he sounds like he's from the Midwest or maybe Michigan. Listen to it wherever you are. Listen to it and see what you hear. It is pretty clear. Alice is right. I don't know where she put that phone or what kind of phone she was using, but you can hear his voice and you can hear it pretty clear several times. So listen to it. See if you recognize it. Look, just because you recognize it doesn't mean it's your father or anyone along those lines. But if you feel strongly, you hear it and you feel strongly, go ahead and call the cops. Call the RCMP. Let them know. Let them look into it. I promise you, they will be able to rule that person out very quickly if it's not them. It will not be difficult to do that at all. But unless you make that call, they're never going to have that lead and they won't solve this case. Someone is going to hear that, recognize the voice, call the RCMP, and the RCMP is going to be able to tie them to that area. And that's what's going to lead to this case being solved. So it's on you. Go listen to it. This is a case that can be solved. Okay. Well, if you have any thoughts on this case, this is a tough one. This is an embarrassing one for the RCMP. This is one, if you're in law enforcement, I hope all of you who are in law enforcement, you listen to this podcast, you hear stories like this, and it makes you sick to your stomach and makes you like a little shaky that anything like this might happen to you one day, and you avoid that and you help the people in your departments avoid that, because this is terrible police work. It's not just not their best work. It's terrible what they did in this case. And we need to avoid that. And unfortunately, it's not just the RCMP. I mean, the RCMP is by all accounts, a world-class police force, and yet they have these stumbling blocks. It can happen in any community. It can happen to any police department. So let's learn from it. Nothing else can come from Amber's case. If we can avoid this happening in the future, that is something we'd like to see. Shoot us an email at prosecutorspod@gmail.com, at prosecutorspod for all your social media. Join us on Facebook, on the gallery. We'd love to see you there. Join us on Patreon. You can watch these early and ad-free, or you can listen to them later, early and ad-free. Either way, whatever you prefer to do. Alice, I think I'm going to nix the questions tonight because, frankly, I'm ready to go to bed. But do you have anything else you want to say before we sign off?
I think we've said plenty throughout this, which is that this case is solvable. May it be also a warning for other cases that we never have a botched investigation like this again, that we take these missing, vulnerable populations seriously, and that hopefully just share her name. Share that 60-second clip. I don't care if people listen to this episode or not. I just want them to hear, I'm going to call it the killer's voice, because if we can identify it, I think we can bring justice for Jacob, bring justice for Tootsie, and for Amber, of course. And thank you guys for giving us a platform to talk about these cases that I think can really benefit from the exposure.
All right, guys. Well, this one is a sad one, but it is a striking case. I hope you got something out of it. We'll be back next week with a new case. But until then, I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the Prosecutors.
Tomorrow's Monday. You're right. We have time.
Yeah.
Plenty of time. Let tomorrow worry about itself.
Hopefully it's on Tuesday.
It's Tuesday.
Otherwise, we definitely
It's
need to talk about it.
That's
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah, I figured we'd just walk through it.
Yes. No, I appreciate that. I mean, you were so good and put everything we needed
We'll just
to know
do
on
every other
it.
slide.
I love every other.
Need a good one.
Don't mess it up. I just don't
mess
know
it
how
up.
you're even upright right now.
I mean, I need a vacation. I need a vacation for my vacation.
Totally.
Yeah.
Vacation with kids, you definitely need. Anyone else do that throughout your day? If you're having like a really rough day where you're like, as you blink, you're like, this is my micro nap. Anyone else? Is that just me? I've definitely done that in trial where I'm like, micro nap. I feel great. I'm back.
Okay, I'm going to try this one.
Okay.